Listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's Working from Home webinar series presented by Aculon. This is the 10th in our webinar series, and today we're going to be focusing on particle modification treatments. My name is Edward Hughes. I'm the CEO of Aculon, and I'm joined with me today with Eric Bruner, the President, and Mary Gattuso, our Senior Business Development Manager. From a logistical perspective, this webinar will be recorded and a link will be sent to all the registrants, giving not only a download of the presentation, but also a link to listen to the recording so you can share those with your colleagues if in the event they were unable to join us today. Also, we would like this to be an interactive webinar, so please feel free to ask questions. Type them into the GoToMeeting question tab as you go along, and we'll try to make sure we leave enough time at the end of this webinar to address as many questions as possible. Again, thank you for joining us today. We hope you are well and that you are safe. Obviously, we are working our way through this pandemic. The scope, the speed, the stakes have been quite dramatic. And as we know, there's certainly a lot of things going on in the United States at the moment. So throughout this pandemic, it's been an interesting experience with a lot of people working from home, and it's given great encouragement for the human ability to adapt to a different environment. And we as a company have had many people working from home. Most people are back now. But during this whole time period, we have stayed open and we have stayed operational. We as a specialty chemical company were deemed as an essential company. And we put on this series of webinars so that we are there for you when you are ready. So hopefully your labs, your businesses are opening back up as well. And if we can help you with different forms of treatments, that's obviously what we want to do. Our goal as a company is to enable our customers to make better products by being an innovative, responsive, and fast developer and producer of best-in-class surface modification technologies. We believe that together we will create winning products. During today's webinar, I'll give you a quick overview of Aculon, talk a little bit about our technology platforms, and then Dr. Eric Bruner will join me and he'll be talking about particle modification options and some application areas. We'll talk a little about our lab services, how we operate with our customers, and then we'll finish with any questions that you have. As a company, we are involved in many different industries. As you can see from this collage of images, we work in the industrial marketplaces, we work in consumer electronics, we work in oil and gas, we work in medical devices. So we're involved in a lot of different things. As a company, we were founded in 2004. With the purpose of basically developing expertise so that we can develop and produce surface solutions to modify a broad variety of surfaces, metals, glass, polymers. We have a library of functionalities that we can apply to different surfaces, including particles. It could be hydrophobic or super hydrophobic, oleophobic, hydrophilic, anti-fingerprinting, adhesion promotion. Our treatments are thin. They are easy to apply. We don't apply them in vacuum chambers. Often no cure is involved. They're safe, they're non-toxic, and we offer a variety of green options as well. We like to think we differentiate ourselves not only by creating proprietary innovative treatments, but also our willingness to work with customers to solve problems. We are the type of company that, once we understand what the requirements are, we'll work with companies to solve that problem as opposed to just throwing a sample or a solution at them and saying, try this and see if it works. We're organized into kind of three core focus areas: electronics, oil and gas, specialty, which includes medical and industrial applications. And our business model is we produce chemistry. So we work with companies during the qualification process, treat their parts, and then ultimately we will be selling the chemistry to those companies or to your subcontractors for application onto whatever component it is you need to functionalize. We have a strong portfolio of IP, over 35 patents. We've worked on thousands of applications. We've invested hundreds of thousands of hours developing this expertise in surface modification. We have over 100 products. Our people are very smart, numerous chemists with PhDs, master's degrees, a lot of electrical and mechanical engineers as well. And we're global. We're based here in San Diego, California. This is where our headquarters are, where we do our main applications lab and manufacturing takes place. And we have offices in Shanghai, Singapore, Dallas, Amsterdam, and we have a series of distributors covering the Asian marketplace as well. So today we're going to talk about particles. So why does particle behavior matter? Well, interaction of particles with other materials can create problems. So what we've developed is a set of technologies that can be used to address a wide variety of these problems. And let me just give you 5 examples of where particles could have issues. It could be relating to the wettability is either too high and you want to reduce that. It could be that the wettability is too low and you want to increase that. It could be that you have functional issues due to clumping or agglomeration of these particles, which cause problems when you are mixing them and in the formulation process. Or it could be that the particles used in the polymeric applications lack the desired level of cross-linking. And finally, you might want to just have a desire to modify a porous network, surface behavior. So these are some examples of kind of problems that we see when we deal with particles. We have a variety of technology, but the core of our technology that we started the company with is related to self-assembled monolayers of phosphonates. It's a SAMP treatment. And that's often designed to impart repellency. It's a monolayer, which is comprised of a phosphonic acid and a repellent carbon-based molecule. And that phosphonic acid reacts with the surface, or with an oxide group at the surface, to create a covalent bond, and it's a very stable bond. And then we functionalize the tail depending on what particular application, whether you're looking to repel water or oil or other things. And that's a very thin treatment. The monolayer is less than 5 nanometers thick. Yeah. And it's a pretty versatile technology. We call it a hook and tail technology. And as I say, we hook into the metal oxide and then we basically functionalize the tail. As a result, we can create strong chemical bonds that are resistant to abrasion. They're chemically stable and resistant. They're thermally stable. And we can impart quite a lot of different surface functionalities, whether it's lubricity or cleanability or just modifying the surface energy, or in some cases, reacting and creating adhesion to polymers. So that was the original technology that kind of got the company going. Since then, we've added a suite of additional technologies around that to basically solve customer-related issues. And so as customers have come to us with challenges relating to their surfaces, we have now developed this set of suite of technologies that allows us a pretty big toolkit to solve problems. And as such, we've developed a series of expertise and platforms all related to surface modification. Whether it's hydrophobic treatments or adhesion promotion or water barrier protection, oleophobic treatments, particle treatments that we're going to focus on today, anti-fingerprinting treatments and hydrophilic treatments. These are all platforms. So when customers come to us and they have a challenge related to the surface relating to one of these platforms, then our technologists can basically look back into the toolkit and pick the right type of treatment that works for them. So with that, let me introduce one of our technologists and does a lot of business development work, and it's Dr. Eric Bruner. Eric, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the interesting applications we do on particle treatments?
Great, thank you, Edward, and thank you for all of you joining us today. We have, as Edward said, we have a broad variety of different types of surface modification chemistries that can modify particles, and whether that's changing the surface energy, whether it's making them repellent or attractive to other materials, and this can be done relatively easily. We generally everything we do is solution phase, so we have active ingredients that we put into either solvents or water, and we can mix the particles into that and they react, and in most cases, if we're successful, we're able to disperse those particles into the solution and functionalize them with those treatments. And those functionalized particles, can be tailored for a kind of a broad range of applications. So a lot of the work we do is on metal particles, or metal oxide particles, whether it's just a metal with a native oxide around the outside, or whether it's actually just a compound metal oxide. And we also have, the ability to modify ceramics, semiconductor particles, glass particles, and we can do that with the self-assembled monolayer phosphonate technology, to react with those oxides. We also have transition metal complexates, which are essentially polymers that, most of the time polymers, that have been reacted with transition metals, and those metals act as binders and can react with the surfaces. And then we can also just use organometallics by themselves to, form polymeric structures on the surface. A lot of times we're looking to keep those particles separate and repellent, or in other cases we want to use that surface modification for adhesion to react into a resin, usually. And then there's also, polymer-based particles. Same kind of thing. We can help make them repellent, either using transition metal complexates or organometallics. We can help, once we bond to them, help them adhere into either onto surfaces or into resin systems. And then we do quite a bit of particle modification for hard coats, whether that's polymeric or inorganic hard coats. So quite a few examples of different particles and powders we've worked with. By and large, most of them have been oxides, but we do, like I said, have experience with other polymeric materials. Done a fair amount of tungsten powders, some Kevlar work. We're able to modify some nitrides, silica, and there's been quite a bit of work we've done in the area of silver and copper powders for some electronic uses. Also, there's ceramics that are used. So just as we're kind of able to modify a lot of different flat surfaces, those same materials that are made into particles, we can also modify them. So yeah, a lot of times the first question is what we're trying to do. And then we figure out the route to try to achieve that. And whether it's, it's trying to change the function of the particles within the system. We can do that by making them hydrophobic, hydrophilic, oil repellent, and we can change their surface energy to tune them into what's needed. And a lot of the initial work we did was just helping provide surface modification to disperse the particles and just get them to successfully break apart, keep them from agglomerated, and being able to kind of mix them into solution. And there's quite a few paints and coatings out there that'll use particles. We're able to modify them and help them sometimes react into those systems, and that can provide additional stability and additional functionality. For a lot of the conductive inks and other types of metal particle materials, we've been able to modify them and improve adhesion. And especially in the area with copper and other metals that are sensitive to degradation, a lot of times by reacting with those surfaces, you can help passivate them and make them more stable. And so there's a lot of really cool applications for this stuff. Yeah, and also particles do have issues regarding durability, whether that's because of thermal stability or resistance to abrasion, chemical stability. A lot of that's surface related. So by being able to modify the surface of the particle, you can affect these characteristics and help improve them. So let's talk a little bit about the application process. Most of the time, like I said, we're solution phase, so we're doing this in a mixer. We'll have a reactor that will add a carrier solvent, we'll add active ingredients, and then we'll add the particles, and then we'll stir those we'll follow that reaction, make sure it's done to completion. A lot of times we're using things like thermogravimetric analysis, kind of making sure we have the right weight add and other types of properties that are important to the informulation. But it's relatively straightforward, but there's certainly some expertise that comes with this regarding loadings and once the particles are modified, sometimes they need to be milled, sometimes they have to be filtered. So there's some some post-processing, but it's all relatively straightforward and scalable. And there's a number of parameters, and we can work with your application to kind of determine what's necessary in terms of coverage, initial concentration of actives, and measuring temperature stability and just looking at different types of solvents that can be used for either the mixing or just the final formulation into the coating system. So three basic divisions in the company. We focus one division kind of primarily on electronics. We have another focus on oil and gas, and then the specialty division, which has a lot of medical and kind of interesting applications. So in electronics, a lot of times most of the work we've done with a lot of the sort of conductive inks or adhesives, some work on non-conductive fillers, and general, we're trying to improve their rheological behavior, their strength, and other characteristics. Done quite a bit of work with silver flake and powders and adhesives, boron nitride and silica for some non-conductive adhesives and coatings, and then quite a bit of work on copper powder, both in adhesives and other types of ink applications. And then we've ventured in the space of fuel cells. We do have some treatments for different particles that go into them. A lot of times affecting how they behave in their system, and then we've done some work around oil repellency, so that's important. So in the oil and gas space, believe it or not, when you think about the rock formations, it's actually you're dealing with a lot of particles. You've got an agglomeration of different, silica, alumina, different types of aluminosilicates, and carbonates, and a lot of those kind of come in the form of particles. So when we look at the pore structure, it's kind of one big structure, but we kind of look at it as particles. And so we've done quite a bit of work in terms of modifying those particles or the downwell ground to affect oil and water flow, and helping either increase oil or increase water flow. And that's been helpful to kind of address some of the blockages that occur in oil wells. We've also done quite a bit of work around treating proppant. The silica and ceramic-based proppants have been tested. I think a lot of markets move towards the least expensive options, but we've done work on a broad range of different proppants. There, once again, trying to affect the flow of oil and water over that proppant, and generally trying to improve oil recovery and minimize the negative impacts of water. So in specialty, we have done quite a bit of work in fuel cells, looking at modifying the catalyst to change how they interact with the various materials that are in the fuel cells. And we've been able to fine-tune those characteristics. We've also done work with Kevlar, which is pretty interesting, silver particles, and there's work that we've done in the areas of gaskets and some shielding. Also functionalization of tungsten powders.
Great, thanks, Eric. That's kind of quite a list of different areas that I know we've worked on over the years. So one of the things that we like to do with our customers is really help you hit the target. So as I say, we don't believe in just throwing a solution over the fence and hoping that it works for you. We much prefer a much more kind of interactive relationship where we are going through a process where we really understand what it is you are trying to do, what the challenges you are facing. Often then we will have the particles or the substrate brought into the lab. We will treat that. We will analyze that. We'll characterize it. We will send that back to you for your testing and to get some feedback. At that stage, if there's some optimization, you're looking for an enhanced functionality, we will optimize that, and then coming out of that process, we'll give you a selection, we'll give you a recommendation for the process, and then that should enable you to be in a situation where you can then have your plant trial, and hopefully if the plant trial goes well, then you hit the target. So it's a little bit more involved than just kind of sending a sample and hoping it works. As I say, our experience is the closer we work with the customers, the more likely we are to have success with those customers. And we've built up a lot of expertise and we've built up a lot of IP over the years in doing this. As I say, we have over 35 patents. We've developed many trade secrets. We've tested thousands of applications. We've got a terrific partnership with the University of California, San Diego, that gives us access to their lab and millions of dollars of testing equipment that's there. We spent hundreds of thousands of hours solving surface problems in our lab, which you can see on the right-hand side. We've invested millions of dollars in building these capabilities, and so working in a collaborative manner basically is we find to have the best success. We also understand that a lot of companies have sustainability goals, and we do as well. And so we offer a range of environmentally friendly solutions, and we follow good business, sustainable business practices ourselves. So we like to help our customers support their goals, and we do that with a variety of initiatives, whether it's VOC exempt solutions, PFOA-free products, eco-packaging and waste reduction. Obviously, try to minimize and make as efficient as possible the transportation, and just using sustainable energy and increased efficiency where possible, even if it's in our headquarters. We retrofitted with 800 LEDs, so trying to make it a smallest carbon footprint as we can. So we support our customers' initiatives by offering those types of sustainable programs. So as you can see, we are a platform technology company that makes customers' products better. That's what we do. We like to think of ourselves as surface solutions experts. We've had this long history of working with customers solving problems, thousands and thousands of applications. And as a result, we have a pretty broad portfolio of products, including the more sustainable options. And we've developed this great IP, testing capabilities, and in-house expertise. So that's really kind of the Aculon story. So let me pause now and open up the question box and see if I can get some questions. Okay. So the first question is, do you only supply the chemistry? Correct. So in the majority of cases, we do supply the chemistry. If it's some specific maybe a more complex process or something like that, or if the customer has a small batches and it's not worth putting into their facility, then in those cases we do have a lab service business that basically will provide those functionalities. All right, the next question for Eric is, for electronic applications, electrical insulation as well, how to avoid, for instance, silicon powder abrading the surface of the mixer and contaminating it with undesirable conductive material?
Okay, that's an interesting question. There is some change in the abrasive properties of particles when you modify them. But depending on the shear and how strong the mix is going, that may not completely solve the problem. Those particles can be, pretty hard, and over time if there's enough force, you can abrade surface modification off particles, and they could still be abrasive. So, we could offer to treat some particles. You could see how well it works in your system. The other way to look at it is maybe going. I'm not sure what metal is being used in the reactor, but you may be able to go to a harder surface, something that's harder than the particle. May help. So that could be kind of a complicated one.
Okay. Next question for you, Eric, is how small of particles can you use for oleophobic coatings?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, the oleophobic, there's really no limitation just by trying to use an oleophobic modification. It's really the challenge is a lot of times just dispersing and breaking apart really small particles. We've gone down to particles that are tens of nanometers in length scale diameter successfully with oleophobic treatments. But the smaller the particle, the higher its surface energy, the more it tends to want to agglomerate, and the harder it is to break them apart. So it gets easier at larger scales and a little bit harder at smaller. But yeah, we can. Some of the chain lengths we have are short, and we can go down to pretty small length scales.
Okay, good. Next question is, how do you know if you've coated the particles fully?
That's a good question too. There's a couple techniques to look at initial surface area to give you kind of an idea of where you're starting at, and then you can look at. We use TGA quite a bit, thermal gravimetric analysis. So as we do different loadings and then rinsing, we can see how much material it takes to get the full loading. And so, you can use kind of a combination of surface area measurements and thermal gravimetric analysis, because you'll see as you go through the TGA, you can see when the surface modification dissociates and the mass change.
Okay. Next question is, we've tried other coatings on particles and they are too thick and they change the functionality. How thin are your coatings and do they impact the electrical properties of the particle?
Yeah, actually we have a key advantage here in that some of the chemistry we have will react with the surface but not itself. And so we can form kind of true monolayers that are, typically 2 to 5 nanometers in length scale. We can go longer than that, but that's, kind of the limit is kind of down around 2 nanometers in thickness. And then at that length scale, electrons can tunnel through the coating, so we can avoid making the particles insulative. So I think we can help you out.
Okay. Next question looks like a paint-related question, and it's, if you add the coated particles into the paint, how do they functionalize the surface of the paint? So I'm assuming this person's asking if it's an additive. Obviously, not all of those particles are going to get to the surface. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question too. It depends on the system. Sometimes particles kind of just naturally get buried and don't really bloom to the surface. You can, by changing how their kind of wetting properties, sometimes you can get them to bloom to the surface and rise up. Other times it's just an even mix, and you'll have some percentage of the surface, the percentage of the particle. So it kind of depends on the system, but surface modification can be used to have effects.
Okay. Looks like I think this is the final question, unless anybody has any more. How about the yield? Do you lose a lot of particles in the process? I guess I'm worried about if something's expensive, and obviously they don't want to have a yield loss on these particles.
Most of the time, yield loss is just due to just loss to the absorption on the reactor vessel surfaces and any sort of transfer equipment, any type of processing you have to do, you may lose some to those surfaces, and you can try to scrape or push as much out as you can, but you will lose some. But it's usually fairly negligible. I would typically see kind of in the 5% range.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you, Eric, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope this was interesting. I hope that maybe this has sparked a thought that maybe we can help you. And if we can, please contact us. Actually, I just got another question come in, so don't go yet, Eric. Do you typically see agglomeration problems with spray applications? If so, can you design against it?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know whether it's just spraying the particles themselves or in some sort of resin system. Surface modification can help the wetting properties, help keep the particles dispersed. So it's definitely worth, if you're having an agglomeration issue, it's definitely worth exploring different types of surface modification reagents.
Okay, good. So again, thank you. We will be sending out an email which will contain a link to the presentation, a link to the recording of this webinar, and contact information for reaching out to us. And hopefully we can help you. We hope you are safe. We hope you are well, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And with that, I will end the webinar. Thank you for joining us today.